Hello and welcome to Here Comes the Bride, the Church Begins. I am Pastor Jim Devore, pastor of Cornerstone Church of Littlerock in California. So glad to be having you join us for this devotional number 60 for the book of Acts. We are in Acts chapter 24, verse 10. Acts chapter 24, verse 10. We ask ourselves three questions as we go through this book of Acts, just a simple way of trying to figure out what the Word of God is teaching and challenging us in. As we read this, what do we learn of God's eternal plan? What do we learn? Secondly, question two, what do we learn of how God is working through the church, for the church, because of the church, to help fulfill his eternal plan? And finally, what do we see God doing through the life of individual people in order to fulfill his eternal plan, as well as bring glory to the church? Okay? All right. So, Paul has been, the Jews went and tried to mob kill him. He was rescued by the Romans, Roman tribune, when he found out that Paul was a Roman citizen. The Jews then tried a plot to kill Paul in transportation of moving from one space to the next, and they wanted to kill Paul. That didn't work. The tribune heard about it, and he rescued Paul, sends him to Felix, the governor, and then along with that, he also sends along the Jewish leaders. So the trial literally is moved from Jerusalem area to where Felix is. Okay, and so now what's happened is 5 days later, the Jews have showed up and they have used their spokesman Tertullus to bring their charge against Paul. Their charge against Paul is that he was a riot maker. He stirred up the people. He's a ringleader of the sect of the Nazarenes, and they basically trash his character, saying he's a plague and he's just trouble throughout the entire world. Okay, alrighty. So the Jews all around in the area agreed with Tertullus, and they've all got this one massive charge against Paul. Okay? All right. So they finished their statement. They, in a sense, closed their case as the prosecuting attorney, and now it is going to be Paul's turn. And when the governor had nodded to him to speak, Paul replied, "Knowing that for many years you have been a judge over this nation, I cheerfully make my defense." Okay, we're going to kind of break this down as we go because it's a long section. So Paul's like, hey, you've been a judge for many years, and I'm glad to be here to make my defense. You are somebody who, in a sense, has heard things out. You've been good to the Jewish people. I'm glad to make my defense. Okay, verse 11. You can verify that it is not true. You can verify that it is not more than 12 days since I went to worship in Jerusalem, and they did not find me disputing with anyone or stirring up a crowd, either in the temple or in the synagogues or in the city. Okay? Neither can they prove to you what they now bring up against me. So Paul just right off says, hey, these guys are lying, okay? They said that I've stirred up riots among all the Jews throughout all the world, that I'm a ringleader of the sect of the Nazarenes, that I profaned the temple. And so he's saying, look, you could check the records. I arrived in the town 12 days ago, okay? And I haven't done any of those things that they've accused me of doing. I haven't had time to do it, haven't done it. All right, so right off the bat, you can say that their event is not true. He could have literally stopped his defense right there and probably won it out, okay? Okay, but this I confess to you, that according to the way, which they call a sect, so now he's going to use their accusation to give him a chance to share the gospel, but according to the way, capital W way, which they call a sect, so he's saying, they're slandering us by calling us a sect, but I'm telling you the way is an actual true group of believers in God who believe the way to God is through Jesus Christ. That's where they come up with the name, the way. It's a slanderous name used by unbelievers to attack the church, and the church just adopted it as a way of saying, sure, you want to call us the way? We'll be called the way because we are the way to God. I worship the God of our fathers, believing everything laid down by the law and writing in the prophets, having a hope in God which these men themselves accept, that it will be a resurrection of both the just and the unjust. So Paul's saying, hey, let me just give you a quick history lesson here. I believe as these guys who want me killed believe, okay? So I always take pains to have a clear conscience, I'm in verse 16, toward both God and man. So since I want to be careful to present myself in a way that I've got a clear conscience that I've only told the truth. After several years, I came to bring alms to my nation and present offerings. While I was doing this, they found me purified in the temple without any crowd or tumult. But some Jews from Asia They ought to be here before you and to make you an accusation, should they have anything against me. Or else let these men themselves say what wrongdoing they found when I stood before the temple. Other than this one thing that I cried out while standing among them, it is with respect to the resurrection of the dead that I'm on trial for you this day. Okay, let's unpack just the statement, or you're going to be lost and confused. He's basically saying, listen, after verse 17, now after several years, so after several years of being away from Jerusalem, I returned to present alms, okay, towards God and towards the city, okay? I'm here to be a blessing to my nation and to present offerings to my God. So I came back. I'm so devout that I came back to show my devotion to my God. So these guys show their devotion to God. I show devotion. We're so devotion to the same God, yet they're out to kill me, okay? While I was doing this, they found me purified in the temple without any crowd or tumult. So in other words, yep, they're right. They found me in the temple. Up in verse 6, they said that he tried to profane the temple. Down here in verse 18, he says, oh no, point 1, they did find me in the temple. Point 2, they wasn't profaning the temple, and I wasn't causing a riot, okay? All right. So I wasn't, while I was doing this, they found me purified in the temple without any crowd or tumult, but some Jews from Asia. So in other words, yes, I had some Jews who were from Asia who came back with me. They were with me in the temple, but they had a right to be there. They were Jews. They ought to be here before you and to make an accusation, should they have anything against me. Okay, all right. So when he says, but some Jews from Asia, he's saying, okay, the ones who make the accusation against me weren't even Jews from Jerusalem. They were Jews who followed me down from Asia to challenge me and to stir up the crowd. Okay, if they really have something to stand on and a reason to have me arrested, then they should be here to make the accusation. Okay, they ought to be here before and to make an accusation should they have anything against me. Verse 20, or else let these men themselves say what wrongdoing they found when I stood before the council. Okay, so if the guys who pitched a fit back in Jerusalem aren't here, then these guys who are here now, let them tell you what I did that was wrong. Even when I stood before the council, let them tell you that. In other words, Paul's saying all these people that apparently have something against me, they can't even get their own story straight. And they're going from so-and-so told me this, so-and-so told me this, so I'm here to tell you this. It's just he's pointing out how weak their case is. Other than this one thing I cried out while standing among them. So he's saying, look, I will confess to one thing. There is one loud noise I made. I yelled out, it is respect to the resurrection of the dead that I'm in trial before you this day. So yes, I yelled out that one statement. Okay? So he basically says, look, here's the parts of their story that are absolutely false. Here's the parts that are true. There's not enough on the false side. The false side is wrong, so you can't accuse me. And the true side, there's not enough there to make an accusation either. That's what he's got to say. Okay? All right, verse 22. But Felix, this is the governor, having a rather accurate knowledge of the way, put them off, saying, when Lysias the tribune comes down, I will decide your case. So Felix knows about the way. He knows about the believers. He knows about those that follow this Jesus who died on the cross and rose from the dead. So apparently he doesn't need anything else from Paul. Okay, he's got enough information. So he's going to wait and hear the other side out. Okay, so and remember who Lysias is? Lysias is Claudius Lysias. He's the tribune who sent the letter. So now he wants to hear Claudius' side of the opinion, okay? All right, so he's going to wait for him to show up. Then he gave orders to the centurion that he should be kept in custody, but have some liberty, and that none of his friends should be prevented from attending to his needs. The him and the his is Paul. He says, okay, Paul, we're going to keep you in custody, but we're not going to be rough on you. You're going to have some liberty, and we're going to let some of your friends come visit you, okay? So they're saying, all right, we don't have an answer. We don't know whether you're innocent or guilty, but we're not going to treat you like a hardened criminal. We're going to give you some freedom. You're going to stay in custody, and we're going to let some friends visit you. All right? After some days, Felix came with his wife Drusilla, who was Jewish, and he sent for Paul and heard him speak about faith in Christ Jesus. This is amazing. Paul has so well presented himself as a prisoner that Felix brings his wife along so they can hear more about Jesus Christ and the way. Can you do that when you're under fire? When you're under fire, when you're under persecution, when you're being challenged, can you be so gentle and loving in your faith that people will say, well, they've got him here bound and chained for some reason, but he seems like a logical, reasonable individual to me. I'd like to hear more from him. Verse 25, and he reasoned, this is Paul, he reasoned about righteousness and self-control and the coming judgment. Felix was alarmed and said, go away for the present. When I get an opportunity, I will summon you. At the same time, he hoped that money would be given to him by Paul. So he sent for him often and conversed with him. So Felix is fascinated by Paul, but Felix is also living his typical sinful life, and he's hoping he can get some bribery money from Paul out of this so that he'd let him free, he'd come away with some money. But still, the stories of Paul fascinate him. Watch this. Are you ready? This is going to blow you away. When 2 years had elapsed, now becomes a 2-year game between Felix and Paul. Summoning him, listening to him, waiting for him to bribe him, putting him back in jail. Summoning him, listening to him, waiting to bribe him. And you thought the court cases and the courts move slow in the United States of America. Well, they move slow everywhere. When 2 years had elapsed, Felix was succeeded by Porcius Festus. And desiring to do the Jews a favor, Felix left Paul in prison. So Felix decides he's going to lose his chain of command. He's going to turn it over to someone else. He wants to leave being a favor of the Jews, a buddy of the Jews. So he decides that he's not going to set Paul free right before he goes. He's not going to give him his freedom. Instead, he's going to let it carry over so that the Jews might still get a chance to see Paul killed. Okay? Here's the deal. 2 years have passed in this process. So coming up at chapter 25, we're going to hear about Paul's appeal to Caesar. But what do we learn here? Sometimes God's eternal plan doesn't move as swiftly as you'd like it to move. Okay? Sometimes God's rescue for the church and its leaders doesn't go on your timetable. Okay? Sometimes the way God deals with individuals is not the way individuals want to be dealt with. But God is still God. So trust the process to Him and continue to be a faithful, patient, loving, waiting servant. Thanks for joining us today for Here Comes the Bride. The church begins. Next time we'll come back to chapter 25, verse 1.